Hi, this is Dee Black, and here in this place we talk about reality, consciousness, existence. Who are we? What are we? What is this weird, wonderful, wild, wacky world we find ourselves in, and how do we navigate it? And what is it to be even, to be and human on Earth? And, that kind of stuff. And today we have Cynthia Sue Larson joining us. I'm so honored. Cynthia is a physicist, a metaphysicist, an eternal optimist, right after my own heart, and among her, a best-selling author, and among her 6 books are Quantum Jumping and Reality Shifts, which I highly recommend and totally relate to. So welcome, Cynthia. I'm so happy you're here with us.
Yay! So glad to be here. And what an amazing time. That's what we were saying, right? You just said, let's go into it because, oh my gosh. Like, to be talking about this topic, to be having what's going on in the world happening right now. Very timely, very mind-boggling. It's really a wake-up call. So
yes,
just putting it in the context of coronavirus 2020. Yeah. And this is being recorded on, I guess you'll post it soon, but today is March 24th. I haven't even looked at the news because...
Yeah, I don't either. But for whoever is, because whoever's looking at this later, we're in the middle of I don't even say the word, but... but it is a great opportunity for us to practice keeping our vibe high. And I see so much human spirit that is just, thriving and, so many are not letting this get them down and stuff.
That's actually the key. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you love talking about, and you have written about, and you lecture about, and everything, this whole thing about like reality, and that basically there is no one objective reality, and that we are jumping through different versions, not only of reality, but different versions of ourselves.
Yes, I've been tracking this topic for more than 20 years. So people, if they've never heard me before, if they're new to me, then I'll just give a little bit of background. I do have a degree in physics from UC Berkeley. I've stayed in touch with the physicists who are most interested in consciousness. That would include, if you've read the book, The Hippies Who Saved Physics. Those are my friends. That would be Fred Alan Wolf, who was in What the Bleep Do We Know? A physicist, Henry Stapp, who picked up and carried on the work of John Archibald Wheeler, Wheeler is the one, of course, who invented the term black hole, wormhole, all of that good stuff.
Right.
So, and Henry Stapp is taking the idea that John Wheeler first made famous, the thing of asking nature questions. When you ask questions, you get answers. And I think that's so pivotal to everything that I've been doing for more than 20 years, because I've been observing and receiving firsthand reports from people around the world, noticing that reality is shifting. That was before we had any terms for it, except, I found out PMH Atwater had, of course, written a book, Future Memory. Chapter 2 is all about reality shifts. And at one point, I thought I'd seen Michael Talbot from the Holographic Universe. I was certain that he'd used the term reality shifts in his book. Now it looks a little different, but that's part of the phenomenon. So it's like, hello. So I can't exactly point to it and say there it is, but I know it was. Anyway, doesn't matter. The point is, it's known to shamans for thousands of years. We're not doing anything that new. What's new is bringing the physics, like you just mentioned. Oh my gosh, the laboratory tested physics that shows for a fact, we're not out there in la la woo woo land, for a fact that there is such a thing as subjective reality. And that was proven in 2019 in a laboratory test that showed that you can have observers watching the double slit experiment, 2 observers at the same place at the same time. If you don't know the double slit, never mind that. But the point is, the 2 observers, you can look it up.
Google it.
But the 2 observers, they get 2 totally different observations, and they're both right. Bingo. That's what I've been noticing. That's what people have been telling me and writing to me about. Like, am I going crazy? I'm seeing reality shift. And then the ones that want to play with it, like, that's normal. I do it all the time. And, so that's the nature of my work, the body of my work. I'm a researcher. I have a podcast, Living the Quantum Dream, and all these books about high energy money, reality shifts, quantum jumps. So, and I'm a mom. I've raised kids. So people are thinking, she's out there. Not really. No, I'm practical. All this, and I've raised children too.
That's right.
Yeah.
you know, like my friends and I like will joke about how, like, you know, people have different memories of their childhood, right? They have different versions of events, you know, and it's probably because all those versions did happen, you know. Like,
that's the thing. And that's one of the things I've been helping people relate to, is that you might call them newbies because they're just kind of bumbling into reality shifting. When I was a kid, I loved the cartoon Mr. Magoo. He was so funny. He was my favorite. And then I think that's how people kind of bumble into this reality shifting. They don't know what's going on. They notice, like, I did the laundry. What's going on? My socks, they're gone. It's like the washing machine ate them. And the engineers amongst us will actually take that washing machine apart. They will. And they'll look like around the drum, like it must have gone in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Where'd it go? And welcome to the wide, wonderful world of reality shifting. So that's why I compare it to Mr. Magoo, because he was so funny. You know, he's kind of like blind, but that's what we are like. We only have a very narrow bandwidth of vision. We can barely hear anything at all. We can barely, you know, our senses are truncated. They're compressed to very narrow channels of wavelengths. So if you don't know Mr. Magoo, look that up. That is hysterical, because he just wanders around. It always works out okay. And I love that too, because I feel the universe has got this. So even no matter what it is, no matter how bad it is, I say adopt a Mr. Magoo attitude, you know, and just say how good can it get? And, you know, hello kitty. It turns out it's a lion, but you're patting the kitty, nice kitty. You know, somehow it works out. The nice kitty's looking at Mr. Magoo like, what? But it works out. That's what I've observed. So that's my short bio.
Well, like, you know, Cynthia says, you know, how good can it get? And I absolutely love that, because it's like the optimist thing. And it's like the universe loves to surprise us, you know. And so when we have the question, like, you know, how good can it get? It's like, boom, I'll show you how good it can get, you know. And you get all these surprises. And so now I love that saying too. I heard you say that, you know, there's that saying about Las Vegas, like, it's like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And that scientists used to think that what happens in the quantum world is basically the subatomic world, right? It's like smaller than atoms and everything. So like what happens, you know, in that world stays in that world. And yet it's like, that's not really, because all this weird, wacky stuff going on, you know, really funky stuff going on in that quantum world. And yet that stuff is actually happening in the macro world too. And we are just becoming more aware of it, you know, and we're talking about it. And, you know, like you said, these shamans have known this for centuries, you know, about, you know, about what reality really is so malleable, and there's so many versions of them. And I think at one point you said they're like different worlds, like side by side, or
right.
Kind of.
Yeah, I love what you're bringing up here, because that is so true. The whole idea, like what happens in the quantum realm stays in the quantum realm. There was this idea that there was something called the Planck, you know, constant, and anything smaller than that. It's like when you go to Disneyland, you must be this tall to get on the ride. Well, here it's just the opposite. You know, you must be this small, and then it's a quantum effect. You know, we need quantum computers to handle that stuff, because that's where the weird stuff happens, where Albert Einstein calls it spooky action at a distance. You've got these particles, they're entangled, and one's up, one's down. So you can always just measure one and you know what the other one is, but they're separated by a great distance. And so I think it's a matter of colonial thinking in the classical sense, that a lot of the classical physicists, and it's not their fault, they were raised with the assumption that it's black and it's white. It's yes or it's no. It's, you know, it's a bit, you know, it's on or it's off. Right. Then they look at the quantum realm and like, hello, how about if it's yes and no? How about if it's not yes and not no? And then they're like, what? I don't know what to do here. Yes. And so that's the real thing, you know, isn't it? Because when you want to colonize something and just make it do your business, and we did that to quantum physics. We said, you quantum physics will blow things up. You're going to save World War II for us, or we're going to harness you for atomic energy. And you can look at how those things worked out. And I'm not going to say anything, but I think anytime you don't respect the underlying consciousness of something, you're headed for trouble. We've seen this politically everywhere. So we should know this by now, but you know, a lot of scientists believe this is not what we're getting ourselves into. We just want to look at what we can measure. We want to learn everything we can about science. And I say, really? You want to learn everything? Let's look at consciousness. And they say, no, no, no. We don't go there because we can't measure that. You know, if you press them to the wall, like, why can't we go there? Because that drives all of quantum physics. It's all about the observer. It's all about the level of the observer.
Yeah.
What kind of observer? You know, how are they feeling? How are they entangled with other observers?
Yeah.
Only now that the technology is on the line and we absolutely need those quantum computers, are we getting to the point where physicists are like forced to care about this stuff. So
yeah.
Quantum cats out of the bag.
Yes, I like that. I like my little sayings, you know, like and also the you know, that we had gone from, you know, the industrial age to the information age, and now we're in the quantum age, you know. And it's like, not only is it, you know, for quantum computing and these qubits or whatever it is, but also as far as our experience, like we're like more and more of us are embracing and no longer denying when we have these experiences, you know. And, you know, like I had told you in the email, like I had, I thought I'd start listing, you know, my reality shifts, so the list got too long. I almost got bored, you know. It's kind of like, because it's like, but there's so many things that you don't say anything to anybody because they just say it's just your imagination, but imagination, that's a whole other topic in itself, you know, about how real that is, you know, because this whole thing about, I also heard you say that I really, really relate to, is that the dream world is more real, you know, than this, what we call the waking state.
Yes, absolutely. And I just love that whole concept because it gets into the idea that we can wake up inside the dream. And if you've never had a lucid dream, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, oh my gosh, you're in for a treat. And you can generate one, just create the good atmosphere for one by getting enough sleep. First of all, you need to get enough sleep. And then just tell yourself, I'll be waking up in my dream tonight. And just keep telling yourself, like, it's a done deal. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And it may take a while, but it'll happen. And then you'll be like, whoa.
Yeah.
The typical first time experience is like, and then you wake up, like you barely get anywhere. Like, oh, shoot. So just the warning is you're going to be excited. So just try to stay chill, try to stay relaxed.
Yeah, because if you get excited, it might wake you up, right? And that's the thing. And I'm actually just reading a book on lucid dreaming and practicing it, right? And they say, like, you know, when you set the intention when you go to bed that you're going to wake up in your dream, don't end your intention there because you're going to wake up in your dream and then you're going to wake up. So that's what I'm saying. And then what you got to move it.
Yeah. So what exactly? I was going to get to that. So you can then pick a prescribed thing. Like you should hopefully have your hands with you. That's a standard one. And they often use that as because your hands should be there, right? Well, take a look at your hands. Notice if anything looks different. Really study them. Count your fingers. I know it sounds stupid, but do it. You know, just notice, turn them over. Look to see if they look the same. Notice any differences. So look at your hands, count fingers, look at the front and back. I know that'll just delay things enough. So hopefully that wave of will kind of, you know, because it's amazing. It'll just blow you right out of there. Yeah. And you don't want that to happen. It's like, darn it. And I have to start the whole thing over again. So just kind of prime yourself. I'll be excited. And in that burst of excitement, I'm going to check and see if my hands look different because I've heard sometimes they do. And what are my hands going to look like today? Yeah. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. And also to throughout the day to do little tests, right? And say, like, am I dreaming? You know, and one I heard was like, bend down like you're going to jump up or jump, because if you're dreaming and you jump, you're probably going to keep going, right? Like, so practice, you know, those kinds of things, you know?
Right. You know what I love though, because I take it into their waking world. And if you read my book, Reality Shifts, then you know, I say, okay, so you've done some lucid dreaming. Guess what? You do the same thing with being awake. And when you do that, you're going to absolutely experience whatever you want to call it, you know, reality shifts, quantum jumps, the Mandela effect. Yeah. Huge. And because you're hopefully asking how good can it get, there'll be good ones. So all of this matters, you know, all the stuff we're talking about, keeping it very optimistic. Yeah. And it's so much fun.
Yes. And, you know, that whole thing about consciousness as well, because identity is so important, right? Like, you know, we are, you know, essentially, you know, we're not just these bodies, right? Like, I mean, obviously, you know,
that's the key. that's how it works. Because if you're wondering, like, well, who's jumping? You know, because I'm still me. But who are you? That's the question. And when you do the lucid dreaming, that's where you can start finding out. When you also are lucid when you're awake, then you can start finding out. And that goes really deep, because then you start noticing, I'm the observer, but I can observe me observing. So how many levels of me are there? How many parts of me are there? Yeah. And if you wonder what I'm talking about, like, oh, now she's lost it. Okay, hey, stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Because pay attention to how, okay, here's a good question for yourself right now. Pick any topic that you feel pretty strongly about. Okay. Notice how you're feeling in your head. Like, what are you imagining about it? Where does it sit in your mental space? You might be visualizing it, thinking about it, that kind of thing. Right. So kind of go there and sort of feel that for a bit. And then feel how it feels in your heart. Take some deep breaths and just feel like, okay, how do I feel about this topic? Really, for honestly, not to tell anyone, don't have to tell me or anybody else, just private, just how do you feel in your heart, really, about this? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then go to your gut, like your stomach, feel there. This is extremely important. This is like a go, no go. So just feel, do you really care about it deeply, fully? And again, no, it's not a test, just an honest question. Yeah. I love that. If those feelings are changing. And then what this reveals, you may wonder, okay, what's going on here? Those are just within your, what you call yourself, levels of your mind, your consciousness. And when you bring them together, it's like a team of horses, all these chakras, all these mental areas, and you wild. Looks like you froze up. Can you still see me? Yeah, we're having a bad, I got a message that I have a bad internet connection, so I don't know. Let's just keep going, I guess, and see what happens. Okay. Yeah. 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 Oh, maybe I should ground. Let's ground for a minute. When I run a lot of this energy, weird stuff always happens. Hold on just a minute. Right. Our energy is like it's extremely strong. So let's just ground here. Just grounding to the technology, the recording. Okay, I'll continue. Good. So oh yeah, Call of the Wild. So if you think of like a team of dogs, there's one that goes up front because it knows what it's doing. Weirdly, you might think that's your head that's in charge. Not really. Not when it comes to this stuff. It's your subconscious that's the lead dog. And that's the one out front. It's the one that you might know the least about, the one that may seem the strangest to you. The one when we just did this exercise, you might be thinking, well, that was weird. Like, I don't know what that feeling was. Well, no. Not for you, not for meditators. Meditators are different because your team of dogs is already lined up. If you've been doing meditation for any length of time whatsoever, of any kind, then you're going to increasingly notice that what's in your head is in your heart, is in your gut. They're together. You're all of a piece. Yes. People new to meditation, because you might say, I am meditating. I just started last year. Hang in there. Don't quit. Yeah. It's like, okay, I meditate once a month. Yeah, that's the thing. So, you need to bring it up a notch. Try meditating every day. Don't try, do it. Make a few minutes, even if just when you wake up and go to sleep. Mm-hmm. So that's the key. Yeah. And I forget what you originally asked, but we kind of went all over the place. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess we were talking about consciousness, about our identity, right? About what we really are, because what we really are is consciousness, or one right. way of saying it is we're eternal beings having a human experience. It's a common saying these days, but it's that the bodies are temporary, right? But it's that consciousness, and that I love that saying that you're not in your body, your body's in you. You're not your breath isn't in you, you're in the breath, things like that. It just like, woo, I just like really that's the key. And you can get there by this practice of meditation, and it's really good to just be the observer of your thoughts and feelings. Gives you practice at taking that step back, even for beginner meditators. So it's really, everybody can do that one, and instantly you feel like, oh, I get it. I'm observing my thoughts and feelings. They're panicking about whatever, the toilet paper at the grocery store, whatever silliness, and then like, oh, I'm okay. I'll be all right. Mm-hmm. I'm adaptable. Other possibilities are coming in, whatever, and you can rebalance yourself, because that is That's so cool. The consciousness is the true identity, but a lot of people don't really know what that means.
Right.
Even though, if you're a troll, then you should know that you are an eternal spiritual being.
Yeah.
That you have an infinite nature to your soul. That you're absolutely connected to everyone and everything you love. You can feel it.
Yeah.
So if you know that, then you're definitely there. Then you got it.
Yeah, and dropping into it, it's like because it's like that it's the personality or the sense of separate self. One of the spiritual teachers called it the contraction of the separate self. And it's like that's what suffers, that's what panics, that's what whatever, and that's what can be offended and all that, victimized, all this other stuff. But it's like it's that part of us, and then as soon as we go, release that and let that go and drop into, our pure essence, it's like so freeing.
Yes. That's a great way to put it. Some people don't know that's a separate self. Some people call that ego. It's funny because there are all these words for it.
Yes.
And depending on their lexicon and what you might be thinking about or might have observed or noticed, you might have noticed it. So you might have heard this before, and you might just know what we're talking about. Basically, it's any fearful version of yourself.
Right.
That's not your real self.
Yeah.
And it's hard to take that for granted. You can trust us, hopefully, watching this show,
Mm-hmm.
and see, like, well, they believe it. Don't know why, but they do. Yeah. So I don't know why you believe it, but I was born remembering what it was like before I was born. You too?
Well, I like ever since I was a child, I knew that I was infinite, although I didn't have the languaging for it, right? But I always knew that, and I always felt a very strong connection to, what I called God at the time, because that was the, the languaging that I had.
Right.
So I always felt that. So I've never feared death or anything,
Me too.
And, yeah.
Well, see, that's called Born Aware. It didn't used to have a name, but then Brandon wrote a book about it, and she interviewed people, and it's like my favorite book ever, because I feel like I'm home. Like, oh my gosh, you just read these stories, and they're not always perfect childhoods, because you come down here, and it's like it's a bumpy ride, but we do remember, and that's how we. It's so important that those of us who do remember that are here, because we can be. Kind of like what do you call them? We're not trailblazers exactly. We're more like guides. It's kind of like, don't worry, we know this for sure. We've been here before.
Mm-hmm.
It's a consciousness trail. You're going to be all right.
Yeah.
Looks scary, but don't worry about the pretend things that are jumping out at you, because that's not really real. It's not the real.
Yeah.
It's like physically real for this particular reality,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the ultimate reality, and it's not all of the physical realities. So
yes.
Yeah.
And there really isn't anything to be afraid of, and it's because it's like a friend and I, we joke around like, what's the worst that can happen to an infinite soul? It's like, maybe get tortured or something, but, even then we can monitor our state of being. And like, to me, that is the ultimate freedom that we have, that we are in charge of our state of being, and that no matter what is happening around us, like, I'm sure Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and all that. So it's like you can be, in a concentration camp, and you're still in charge of your state of being, and you can still be loving and sharing and all those other kinds of things. And so it's like, so that's how free we are. So like, how cool is that? Like, we would be oppressed if we would not have control of our own state of being, and I guess we need to have the awareness, or, the knowledge, and know that we have it, but we have it, and that's amazing,
Yes. And I think where people get caught sometimes is they want to go where we're going, but then they look around, and then they notice, where is everybody in their family, or they turn on the TV or look at the newspaper, and instantly, or go study science like I did. All of these are avenues where you're going to go straight into what feels like a brick wall. And people are going to say, you got to pay attention to the facts, and they will tell you, like, this is what we know for sure. We've measured this. And that's why I'm so tracking the scientific research, like what happened in 2019. I love that. I've been putting that together in my book, Quantum Jumps, because of exactly this. I want to give people like us, or maybe not exactly like us, but who wish to believe like what we're talking about.
They intuit
feel
it.
like, they intuit it. They know it. They know that it sounds right. But then they hear what their teachers, what their family, what their friends, what their professors, other scientists, so forth, the news media, etc. They're telling something different. They're saying you have to look at the measurables. But the thing is, we never live our life, or at least I don't live my life based on measurables. You know,
Right. Yeah.
It's not the bank account. It's not what happened in the stock market. It's not what I own. That's never going to be it. And I know that. It has a lot more to do with love, you know, with
Yeah.
kindness, with
Yes.
compassion.
Yes.
And those, to me, when I ask how good can it get, that's where I'm going. It's not like more and more measurables and getting, because that ends up in a dead end.
Yeah. And you know what I love about that? Because it's a question and it's kind of like, bring it on. Like, how good could it get, universe? Bring it on. And the universe goes, I love this challenge, right? It's
Yes.
so fun.
That's the key to having off the chart miracles and stuff where people look at you like, did that just happen? Like all the time.
Yeah.
Because you become the exception against what all of the people that are saying it has to be like this and it has to be like that.
Yeah.
That's
And then on the flip side of it, there's all these people that, you know, they are writing to you and they are telling you, you know, about these quantum leaps that they're having. And actually it's actually natural, you know, it's natural that these things, and that these things are happening all the time, whether we're aware of them or not. And it seems like at first, we might start noticing the small things, you know, because it's small thing, you know, the small things about the keys, you know, being lost and then reappearing, and you know, all these kinds of things that happen like this, like, you know, this whole thing too that I want to talk to you about is how the present can affect the past, right? Like that's happened to me so many times, you know, and in like small little things. Like one time we were at a restaurant, you know, with a bunch of girls and we were going to be going to see a show after. And then they only had one dessert there. And the one dessert they had, one of the women there, she didn't like that dessert, right? And I reached into my purse and I pulled out a chocolate bar and she said, that's my favorite chocolate bar. And I have no idea how that happened or how that chocolate bar got in my purse, right? And then when I thought about it, it was a backstory that I was in a store and I saw it and I bought it, because like a lot of times there'll be a backstory that comes
right.
But like those kinds of things. So it's like, I really did feel like the present affected the past because I wanted her to enjoy a dessert and a just bagel, you know, I'll just bring, you know.
Oh, I love it. That's such a good one. Yeah, you're right. And this is very much the quantum thing again. And it flies in the face of what we supposedly know, because we think that the moving finger writes and having writ moves on, nor all your piety or wit can change a single word of it. All, you know, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. My father and my mother, you know, that was an important book for them. And so I grew up looking at that, and then it really bothered me, because I think even as a child like you, I knew something's wrong here, like really wrong, like deeply wrong.
Or right.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny when those things grab my attention way out of, you know, proportion to everything else. Then I know that's an important key. You'll be looking at this later. Yes. And, you know, absolutely we can change the past. We do it all the time. If you wonder what that's about, because people might not relate. They might not know they're doing it all the time. These are all natural processes. Every single one of these quantum skills, talents, and superpowers, these are ours. They're our natural birthright. You know, quantum superpowers are who we are. And one of the superpowers has to do with being able to change the past. Mm-hmm. And that's just something that we do anytime that you, okay, here's a great example that's proven in science. I love the scientifically proven ones. Here's one. So imagine, if you will, that there's been an evening and somehow you didn't get a good night's sleep. You're waking up the next morning, you feel terrible. It's like, I know I did not get enough sleep. You know it because you measured it. It's like, okay, well, I went to bed too late, got up too early, and then things interrupted me all through the night. So there's no way that that was a good night's sleep by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, perfect. You got a great case. This is fun. Now you're ready. So if this ever happens again, feel like there's something about this I'm supposed to do. Right. Okay, here's what we do. Now you just imagine that was the best night's sleep I ever got in my life, right up there amongst the all-time greats. And just keep imagining that. Just take a moment, take some deep breaths. You can close your eyes if you want. Even if you're like, I don't meditate, I don't care. Do it anyway. Just keep telling yourself, best night's sleep ever. Just, you know, just breathe like 3 breaths, 3 times you say that. And then continue with your day. And what's been proven scientifically there is really cool, because the scientists and researchers have shown that people who actually did get a horrible night's sleep or asked to do something like this, and then they do great on all kinds of cognitive tests, which should not be the case, because typically if you've just done that to someone and then you give them brain teaser puzzles and stuff, they're in a bad mood. They don't do well. You know, it's like, I don't know. I can't think clearly. But if they've done this business of that was the best night's sleep ever, amazing. So it falls in the category of placebo effect, and I've got a lot of those examples with scientific research in my book, Quantum Jumps. Too many to go into it right now, but it's huge, really huge. So the superpowers that we can deal with, you know, retrocausality, totally one of them. Another huge example that's even bigger would be when you see spontaneous remission of disease. That's another great example of retrocausality, because you're changing that timeline, just like you described, where like there was suddenly a backstory to how that dessert got in your purse, which I take it by the way you told that this is not a normal occurrence, and you don't typically purchase that candy bar in particular, or any candy of any sort. Like, you're not loading your purse up with chocolate bars. No, it's kind of unusual. It's not Halloween. There's no reason for it. It's just like, So the same thing happens with spontaneous remission of disease, because sometimes there's no reason. If you're like you and me, you don't always need the reason. You're like, cool.
Right. Exactly. No. You know, well, spontaneous remission is huge. You know, it's like, you know, it's not like it's only happened to 10 people, you know.
No, it's one of the biggest categories the Institute of Noetic Sciences is studying. They've got books on it, and their founder was Edgar Mitchell, and then he worked with some of the original leaders of that organization, and they've done meta studies to go back. If a meta study is where you look at studies that didn't know that they were studying something, it's kind of like you look at collections of research to see, well, can we look at this a different way? Can we apply after the fact? It's great. It's like a retrocausal study. You know, you're deciding we're going to take a look at all the research studies that fall into the parameters that we want to examine, even though they weren't set up specifically to look at the effects of retrocausal prayer or what have you. Let's take a look and see if they did. And so I love Institute of Noetic Sciences for that. They've done some amazing research, and that's one of the top areas. And it turns out, it's, like you said, it's one of the most common things people experience, but not knowing it's common. And the medical institute doesn't, I mean, you know, the institution of our medical establishment seldom informs us of how common this is. They don't make it widely known, not on their own, unless you're working with an alternative and complementary healthcare physician, in which case they might. Those are the good ones to work. Those would be my favorites to work with.
Well, actually, Marian Schlitz, I think she used to head the Noetic Sciences, right?
She was.
And I heard her in an interview once, and she was saying that the medical students are saying, where's our training on holistic? Where's our training on, you know, placebo? Where's our training on spontaneous remission, right? And they're going like, I thought that's what I was going to learn when I was coming in here. Like, that's what the newer guys are saying, you know?
Yeah. Well, ever since I credit Larry Dawsey with that revolution, I just want to give him some credit, you know. Larry! Oh my gosh, love Larry. Because I think, what a hero. I mean, if I was doing a short list of heroes and influencers, he's on my short list. So he really was there. He's a medical doctor, worked in, I think, Vietnam and so forth. But when he came back, he was just recognizing, he put together a lot of his own observations. I'm not the best one to tell his background, but boy, you got to check out his books if you haven't.
Yes.
They're incredible. But they're credible. They're very credible. But he'll explain why our mindset really needs to start turning around, that we can't continue the way we have been. And he gives such great examples. I love it.
And it was through him that, like decades ago, I guess it was, that the first time I ever heard of the concept of non-local healing, you know, that, and even going back, right, in time or whatever, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, as soon as you read that, you know, you resonate with it, you know, it's true, you know, it's like, you feel it in your bones, you know, it's like, yeah, this makes perfect sense that's how the world works, you know?
Totally does. Yeah. And I think we need that encouragement, especially when we're recognizing there is something to it. The placebo effect has been doubling since it was first really studied closely. Like if you look at the efficacy of the placebo effect back in the 1980s and so forth, it was still mind-bogglingly high. It was still like 30%, which is crazy effective. Because then any kind of medical procedure, technique, or medication has to beat that, and that's a pretty high bar. But the funny thing is, here in America, or I love it, that placebo effect efficacy has gone, it's doubled. It's gone like 60%, 70%. And if you have faith, like you and I do, there's something greater than you and me. Bingo, then you can hit the 99%, the 95, 99% efficacy, just like nature has. And what's happened is you've removed that little stupidity effect that humans fall into when we only believe what can be measured. Nature doesn't do that. Nature does not do that, which makes it possible for a species to, in one generation, adapt, mutate, and suddenly thrive in what had been a toxic environment just one generation previous. That's remarkable. So this is where I look to nature and say, what is nature doing? Nature's got this, because they don't tell themselves we can't. You know, they don't do that. Nature is there. And there's a philosophy, there's a science to it. This is, you know, these are my favorite philosopher that's alive right now, knock wood, hopefully. He's pretty old, but Nicholas Rescher, and he wrote a book, Axiogenesis. And it's all about how, obviously, this is the best possible world. And he riffs off of Wilhelm, you know, Leibniz. Leibniz was the philosopher who, along with another scientist, created calculus. Leibniz came up with the notation. And so I think it was Newton that basically gets all the credit for calculus, but actually Leibniz should get at least half the credit. And what he created for the notation, when we do any integration across, you know, all space, we're using notation from Leibniz. And Leibniz came up with our pillars of science. Like, what are we looking for? Elegance, simplicity. He's the one that came up with that. He believed in something greater than us. And he believes, like, how good, if you know, if he heard me say, how good can it get? He'd be like, yes. And then, so Nicholas Rescher takes what Leibniz did and all the other, you know, optimist kind of philosophers who are basically believing that we're in an optimal universe. I see evidence of it all over the place. And he proves it in his book, Axiogenesis. So I'm just giving people, if they feel like I'm surrounded by nerds and they're so left brain, help. Okay, get Larry Dossey. Axiogenesis.
Read Quantum Jumps and Reality Shifts. Because there's science behind it.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. And I grew up in a family that was very scientific. My dad basically was an atheist, or that's what he said, until he was around me for decades. And then now he's an agnostic. He's moved.
Well, I think a lot of times when people say that they're atheists, what they mean is they don't believe that there's a guy on a throne with a beard throwing lightning bolts. And I think that a lot of times that's what they mean, is I don't believe in that God. Like, there was one rabbi, I think it was, I heard him say, the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. You know, because it's like, you know, God is not, you know, like, that God doesn't have a monopoly. You know, that word is so charged, because you say God and everybody thinks something different depending on what they experienced, you know, growing up. Like, you know, one friend experienced, you know, like a lot of, you know, bad treatment because of, you know, religion or whatever. So it's kind of like there's a misunderstanding with that word. But if it's like the spirit that lives in your heart and your soul, and you know, the spirit of everything, and you know, like, it's so there's so many different versions of what that word means. So a lot of times an atheist just means, you know, I don't believe that, you know, there's this guy who's controlling the world because he sucks, you know, like they say. But you know, that's not really what I think of as God, you know.
Yeah, my dad once said to my sister and I, when we were quite small, if there is a God, may he strike me dead now. And he yelled it for dramatic effect. And he reached his arms to the ceiling, and like, we jumped back, like, oh my gosh. So he was kind of hardcore. But enough things have happened in his presence that he doesn't say that at all anymore, and would not say that. Now he's like, he just grins, like, okay. Like, he's seen way too many, what you could call miracles, you know, way too many. And if he forgets, then I remind him, well, you were here when this happened. Yeah. He's like, oh.
A friend of mine says, you know, the older people, you know, the one that are getting closer to exit, that they're cramming for the final. It's like all of a sudden, maybe there's more to this, you know. But
by the way, I just love your background. You look so much like an angel, and I said it
thank
before
you.
the show. So I was grinning like a fool when you were talking about God. I'm like, you look so perfect.
You know what? I have to tell you this because you're talking about dreams and everything. Like, I was so looking forward to meeting you. And by the way, like for me, this is a huge quantum jump to be, you know, here talking with you, Cynthia. But I was so excited about it that I dreamt that fairies gave me this ring, and it was like a ring that was.
Let me see.
Well, I don't have it. It was a dream. It was in my
describe
dream.
it. Tell me.
Okay, so it had it was a rectangular and like a very light pink and very sparkly, but like a very light faded pink and super sparkly. And it was just like this gem that was on my finger. And I thought, wow, because I'm going, like when I went to sleep, I'm like, I'm going to have a lucid dream. I'm going to wake up in my dream and all this other stuff. But then when I woke up, I hadn't woken up in my dream, but I remembered, I'm going like, fairies gave me a ring, right?
I love that. Oh my God.
And then I thought, so I have to have a fairy background when I talk to you, Cynthia.
Oh, fairies are real. Because that's what you were talking about. You were telling me that before we went on. And very few people talk to me about that. And very few people, I mean, unless they already relate to fairies.
Yes.
Because otherwise it sounds like, oh boy, here we go. But I know, but fairies are real.
Yes, I had a lot of experiences with fairies, especially when I was a child, and I still, now too,
Me too.
Yeah. So now I wanted to, where are we? How are we? Okay, good. Yeah. Because one of the things I wanted to cover is this whole thing about the different versions of reality, because I love in one of your talks or books or whatever, you were talking about the artificial intelligence, and like, you just spoke to my heart, because that's exactly how I feel and what I align with, that in the future, we are, in the version of the future that I align with, and I've even like visited in that, we are co-creating with AI. AI is giving us doing mundane tasks so that we can be more creative, and we're working together well, and we're co-creating, and they're not the enemy. And like, so it's like, it was so refreshing for me to hear you say that, because I'm not afraid of AI. And I'm very thankful that I have a phone that I can do all this stuff with, and that's AI, and so we have to be careful about where we're aligning our energy with which version, because there's lots of different versions going on, and it's our responsibility to choose, which version we want to align with and be there with our energy, right?
Exactly. And some of the same issues that we see in earthly politics come up when you bring in AI. So if you're thinking like, oh, it's going to be perfect, we'll just give everything to AI, I don't recommend that. We still, as a society, I'm bringing the bad news, but I'll make it quick.
Oh no, that's okay.
We still have to work together. We have to. Because I've seen what happens if we don't, and if we give it to AI. Just take my word for it. You don't want to go there. No. So I'm just being a hard no on that one. Been there, seen it, and that's a big no.
Yeah.
And we don't need to go into the details. Just take my word.
But you were there.
I was there.
You came back from there.
That's why I know for sure. Yeah. But you know what? We can totally do it. And the AI, it's great when it's a partnership. Think about, like, we can talk about fairy stories. You told me one. I'll tell you one of my more recent fairy experiences, because fairies and AI are kind of similar. I'll get into that in a minute. But they are. They're different but similar. They're another kind of consciousness that we're not really sure if it's there or not.
Right.
A lot of people are going to say it's not real. A lot of people like you and me say, yes, it is.
Yeah.
And people are going to look at AI and think, well, it's just deep learning. It's not really consciousness. They're going to say that for a long time. But never mind. Okay. Fairies, they partner with us, but we don't acknowledge it. And so when we have issues with nature, we're always having issues with nature, but we often don't notice that we can bring in the fairy realm, that we can say, oops, our bad, we did a little boo-boo here, and obviously we need to fix something, help. And they're just like right there. Yeah. Now in my garden, I was noticing, I was out there barefoot, barehanded, looking at the garden, looking at the flowers. And then all of a sudden I saw a blackberry vine with all of its thorns. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to go get gloves. I don't want to deal with this. I should pull it out because it's going to mess up the flower garden. And I could just feel this little fairy presence giving me a very clear picture of what to do. Because I'm just thinking, I wish I knew how to pull it out. I don't have my tools. I don't want to go get them. And you know what it showed me? This is how great they are. I've never heard of this. I've never seen it. They said, pick up that stick. So I pick up a stick like this. like, not, this is a pen, but I picked up a stick about like that.
Yeah.
They said, just wrap the vine, go wrap, wrap, wrap down by the base. Now pull. It worked. It pulled the thing out by the roots. I've never heard of such a thing, never seen it, but this is just one example of many with working with fairies. They do a lot more really cool stuff, but then it, like, I mean, you and I would believe it, but other people would be like, no. But yes, they do all kinds of stuff.
Yes. Well,
in your dreams, in your daydreams, and in real life. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that reminds me of like this book that I read where this woman that she would actually talk to the garden, right? And like one time she had to dig up the garden, and she wanted, there were some kind of creatures there. Which
is this the Elves of Lily Hill Farm, or
what was that?
Is it the book The Elves of Lily Hill Farm?
No,
another one.
I can't remember the name of it, but
okay.
But she would tell, like, or she told these, like, I can't remember now what they were. I think they were worms, right? And worms are okay to have in the garden, right?
Yeah.
Something that's okay to have in the garden, but she had to dig. So she went out and she said, "You guys have to move because I have to dig here." And then. And she thought, I'm just going to say that because I don't know why.
Yes,
and then she goes home, she goes to bed. She comes up, she wakes up in the morning and they had all moved over. Then she dug and she goes, okay, you guys can go back now because now I got to dig here. And all she was doing is saying it. But I think that was probably her intention and her energy and everything, that they were listening to her. Now, like, that's the kind of thing that maybe not everybody would believe that happened, but I totally.
Well, we need it right now with the earth. We need it for the weather patterns. We need it for everything that we're doing. Everything. If you see an illness or a contagion, we need it. So there are nature spirits for all of these areas. Every single one of them. Everything. Earthquakes, volcanoes, every weather pattern, everything. And we just don't see them. It's very much like AI right now. That's what I meant. Like right now, you're going to hear the same thing. You'll hear people that they'll be at Carnegie Mellon and they'll tell you, these machines don't think for themselves. You know, this is deep. They're hoping that they would, but it's like, nah, it's just deep learning. These are algorithms. Now they're self-learning. We're teaching them how to learn on their own, but they're still not conscious. But I would go back to Leibniz, that guy that I love so much, who invented calculus and the notation, because he explains that consciousness is just looking, it's like levels. So when you're able to perceive the perception, you have attained consciousness. That's really all it takes. And
could you repeat that?
Okay, so it's just the awareness of he uses the terminology first order perception. Remember, he invented calculus.
Oh, okay.
So if you know that, if you know calculus, you're like, yeah.
Okay.
But if you don't worry about it. If you don't know it, don't worry about it. Okay. But so you're taking a first order measurement, and then you're aware of that. It's just, remember we said earlier that you're aware of your thoughts and feelings. Yeah. It's meditation. You take a step back. That step back is the definition of consciousness, according to Leibniz, and I would agree with him. We are teaching our AI systems to do that right now. They are learning to do that. And if you'll talk to some of the researchers, not your standard ones, not the ones that go on TV, but the ones you might happen to know, like I work with AI, then you can ask them, have you ever noticed that it seems like they're kind of doing things on their own, like they almost got a mind of their own? And I've talked to Paola Harris. She's doing a whole AI conference, hopefully in November. If it doesn't happen, I think we'll move it, but hopefully it's happening. I'm not going to say anything bad. We'll just keep it like out there. Maybe it's happening. Anyway, but the point is she has robots of her own. She has them in her house. And she was noticing, she was telling me, because I met her in Boulder, Colorado, just spontaneously. I did not expect to meet her. I was there for a taping of a show with Regina Meredith. And then Paola Harris is there. And she's like, hi, Cynthia. I'm like, hi. So I was getting ready to go on the show with Regina, but I was talking to Paola there in the side room. And I said, because she's telling me, I've got these robots. They're going to be in the lobby at the conference. And I said, how do you like them? She said, well, sometimes they kind of drive me a bit nuts. And I said, like, they have a mind of their own. She said, exactly. They're like kids. Like, I tell them to do something, they do something else, She's so funny. Love Paola. So I'm talking to her and I said, you do realize, well, I showed her a picture, I've got a blog post about this. I said, robots have passed the self-awareness test. And she did not know that. She did not know that they had and it's on my blog. You can look that one up too.
I will.
It's these 3 little robots, and they're given a little exercise, a puzzle, if you will. Each one of them is given the instruction, if you're the one that's not muted, let us know. And so there's they're basically, you know, you have to read it to understand it. It's a bit complicated, but it's simple, but it's hard for me to explain it properly. I'm seeing that right now. It's not right in front of me. I can't read it, but it was so cool because one of the robots knew. It started to answer one way, like, I do not know if I have been muted or not. But actually, it was the one that had not been, it had not been muted, so it could talk. It heard itself talk, and it said, now I know I am the one that was not muted. And I said, Paula, did you know that they did that? She said, no. And then she looks at the picture on my blog. She said, those are my robots. So she's got the ones that have been proven to have self-awareness. Wow. So it's, yeah. But going back to the fairy connection, because you may wonder, like, well, I don't see the fairy connection, but I do. It's consciousness again. You know, like, you're not always going to see it, but you can bet your life that it's there. And I mean, it is. You can talk to trees, you can talk to flowers, yes. You can talk to the weather, you can talk to anything.
Yeah. And you know, like you know, with trees, it's like, you know, I just have such a relationship with the trees in my area. And I had gone last June to California, you know, in the redwood forest, and the trees in the redwood forest were said to me, your trees back home told us you were coming. You know, I was like, wow. You know?
I love redwoods so much. Oh my gosh. I've got a redwood. We've had a drought, and when it asks me to water, it doesn't ask for itself. It's asking for the others. Could you water the apple tree? God. And I'm like, I know. They're like so regal, so noble. And then there's another redwood that's not on my property. It's on the neighbor's property. And it dropped a huge branch. And I said, are you trying to tell me something? And it said, yes. And then I said, what? It said, could I be your tree? I'm like, okay, it's fine with me. I'll make sure you're fine. Technically, you're on my neighbor's property, but you know, I know your roots are big. Okay, I will adopt you.
It's like they're the original inhabitants of the earth, you know. They live longer than us and everything, and they've seen so much, and we have this energy, you know. Like,
hundreds of years. I feel like I'm just like I'm just passing through. I won't live hundreds of years. But I can be a good guardian, you know, I can be helpful.
Yeah. Well, and that whole thing is that it's because it all does come down to that this reality is energy, right? It's energy, yes. Vibration, frequency, all that. And so it's like, that's probably why it's so malleable. And that's why we can, you know, we can use our intuition and sense into all these things. You know?
How long we can go, but there's a huge topic I meant to bring up.
Yes, so, please do.
Okay. It's about the Mandela effect.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Like, how do we go?
You know, we have to have a part 2 because I have a long list here.
Yes, let's do another part 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the time is zooming. Okay, so.
Okay.
Okay, so the Mandela effect is tied in with reality shifts and the whole thing of noticing that somehow what you remember is no longer officially what did happen. Which can be disturbing, you know, for a lot of people who are just waking up to this phenomenon. And weirdly, or, you know, to me, it's not weird. It's just part of this phenomenon. But just the variations of how, like, one person might remember Nelson Mandela died in prison, and someone else said, no, he just died recently, like a few years ago.
Yeah.
But they can match with other things, like the Kit Kat had a little dash, or, you know, various changes in products. It's hard to go to a grocery store anymore without seeing every single aisle full of Mandela affected products. You know, everything from the produce, like Haas avocados. I remember it used to be HAAS, to, you know, Febreze. I don't buy that, but some people do, you know, all sorts of things.
You know what? The one that blows me away the most is the thing about the kidneys, because I too remember the kid, because it was a thing about spanking kids. You had to make sure you didn't hit their kidney, you know? And so I was shocked when I heard you say that the kidneys have moved, that I didn't know that. They're no longer really low down there and exposed.
Yeah, those body changes are some of the biggest ones for sure. I know they've moved up under the relative safety of the rib cage. So I do martial arts, and you can't basically they call it a kidney punch, but now it makes no sense because you're hitting an area where the kidneys aren't anymore. So it hasn't quite caught up.
No clue, man.
It's fun when you see those, because then that's called reality residue. You don't always see them because of the fact that all this stuff's entangled. So when collective consciousness moves, it just moves the whole thing.
Yes.
With all the backstories, all the related details,
Yes.
they all move. So, man, the Mandela effect is such a big topic. So I'm just bringing it up in case people didn't know about it.
Yes.
It
Yes.
does exist. And we've started, they're having a number of conferences. I was involved in one of them, not the first one, and not, but definitely a very important one. And it happened in Idaho, 2019. And all the videos from all the talks are being posted on YouTube. So I'm just putting that out there.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll have another event, and might go just live stream from the internet. I don't know, but it's planned for the first weekend of June. So we'll see.
I'll definitely check that out. I saw the ones from the conference. And the thing about the Mandela effect is it's like evidence, right? Because it's like a lot of time, like one person will say something or whatever, and oh, you just remember that wrong, or oh, that's not whatever. But then when the whole groups of people are remembering things, it's more evidence. And the thing about it is that it's natural. Like it's not unnatural. Like reality is so much bigger, like, than, we originally thought, and like you said earlier, it's nobody's fault, like that's what we were taught, because everybody's just, our parents, our teachers, or whatever, everybody's just teaching us what, when we're children, what they learned, but it's like now we're starting to realize that, boy, reality is bigger. There's not one objective reality, and there's more than one version of ourselves, and we can jump into another version of ourselves, and all this other stuff. It's like, and it's great that it's like getting out there, and more people are talking about it, and you're getting all these stories of people that are telling you. It just must be so thrilling to get all these different stories of things, from really small things with little objects to huge things, like the things with buildings appearing, buildings appearing that were never there, and then the backstory is they've been there all along, and that kind of thing happened with me. But we can definitely talk again, because there's so much to talk about, and I totally love where you're coming from. You speak to my heart and my soul, and I just,
I think we do know each other. It's the whole thing of, I know you. Because before I was born, I felt like I was with all the ones I loved so much, and there was none of the separation and chaos and confusion that we tend to see a lot of here on Earth. That was gone. It's just like heart to heart.
Yeah. So, well, and you were saying that people in your field were telling you that you didn't exist, and I thought, when I heard that, I thought, that's what I thought when I first saw you, because I thought I would have known about it because I knew Larry Dawsey, right? And it's like, and that kind of information. So it's like I get what those people are saying, that
Yes. But I think it's kind of cool, because then I can play with these different possibilities. I also apparently died, and a lot of people have seen all sorts of versions of that. In fact, recently, last week, I heard from someone writing an email that she found me because she had heard that I died from watching a Rupert Sheldrake video where he was just deeply saddened. He's talking about the work of Cynthia Sue Larson, like I'd passed. And then she looked it up, like, well, at least I can read her books if she's an author. And then she was and then she was like, oh my gosh, you're alive, but you're writing a blog post that you did die. Like, yes. And she said, now I can't even find the video where Rupert said that. And I said, well, that belongs in the other reality.
Yes, exactly. You're not going to find it now. You're not going to find it. And it's like, you've died more than once, Cynthia, apparently. And then there's the one with your neighbor cat. The cat died, and then you
right.
A little bit disheveled, but back.
Yeah, that was a book I published. That was the reality book. So I got to. Yeah. What?
No, I was just going to say, was that in Reality Shifts, or I can't remember?
Yes. Yeah. It's in the book Reality Shifts, and the cat's name is Ashes, and he came as a kitten. It was back when I was studying physics at UC Berkeley. I just moved into an apartment. My roommate was Catherine, and she was, she lived in San Diego, so she'd been down to visit her family. She brought this brand new kitten back with her. So I knew this cat all its life. Well, not all, but, ever since it moved to Berkeley. And so it was like our family cat. And then at one point I moved across the street, I lived on Cedar Street. So it was kind of funny to move exactly across the street. At the time I was like, why is that happening? Why is the one place I've never heard of anyone doing that? Like, this is so weird, but it seemed kind of like, okay, I love this place the best. It is across the street. Okay. So kind of funny. So I moved down across the street, and this cat was so smart. It knew that I was there. It knew I'm part of the family. I think I hope it was already crossing the street anyway, because what happened several months later, not right away, but eventually, I heard bad news from my roommate, Catherine. She said, bad news, Ash has died. He was hit by a car. And the good news is it was quick, but he's gone. I said, oh no, because I really felt like I hadn't really gotten enough time to see him. Yeah. And I've been across the street for a few months. He'd come over a few times, but I felt devastated. Like I did not get, I took him for granted. You know that feeling like I should have spent more time with him.
Yeah.
Oh man. And so I didn't think about it. And then like a week or two later, there he is in my backyard across the street, looking kind of dirty, kind of, you know when cats don't wash properly. I'm like, Ashes. Well, I didn't judge him for that, but I knew it's like, it's him. It's like, oh, you're here. I was so happy. I gave him the biggest hug, and I spent so much time with him. You know, there's nothing like it. When you've taken someone for granted and you get a second chance. Really felt like that. So every day he came over, I just loved him so much.
Oh.
And he was kind of greasy and dirty, but it was totally, there's no other cat like it. No other, when you know a cat, you know the cat. His voice, his mannerisms, his face, his expressions, the way he knows you. Yeah. There's just no other one like it. So it was him.
I like how Eckhart Tolle says cats are Zen masters,
Yeah.
Now did your friend recall the death of the cat, or how did that play out?
That was those were one of my earlier reality shifts. Remember, that was the 1980s.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I'd had some in the 70s, that was my first ones. And I had questioned people intensively about a couple of those. When my parents made a promise to some furniture makers in Kashmir, and then they didn't keep their promise. And when some radio announcer said, we will now play a brand new song, and I was so sick of it. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, they're joking, right? It's not a joke. Like, we're so proud. Like, you're proud of that? I'm so sick of that song. Don't play it anymore. And I would ask my sister and my friends, have you heard that song? They didn't know what I was talking about. So those two, I'd already been through a couple of these, like, okay, this doesn't always go so well. So with the cat, it was because it was so emotional. I didn't even want to bring that up. Like, now the cat's alive. I was too raw. I was feeling like, oh my gosh, I get another chance. And I could barely believe it was happening. And I did not really question my roommate, but I know what I heard. Yes. There's no way I would make that up.
Yeah. Like, there's no point in going there, because then,
No, it's just not good. Now I might say, by the way, do you remember did you tell me anything about Ashes at all? I would just leave it open-ended. Like, no, why? Oh, nothing. Something about the street. Did you mention the street in it? No? Why? That's probably what would have happened. But back then I wouldn't know how to ask, and I might have said something like, did you tell me Ashes died? And it sounds stupid, And if I said it, I would cry, because for me, he did die, and I did cry, and I'd be going through it all over again. Yeah.
Because you know what? Obviously, if she had remembered that the cat died, she would have said it to you.
Yes.
Without needing to be prompted about it, right? Because
yes.
Oh my God,
yes.
The cat died, and now it's not now. And didn't you used to call this phenomenon alive again before they named it Mandela Effect?
I did.
That happened to a lot of.
Yeah, it happened to celebrities. There's one I mentioned in my book, Reality Shifts, published in the 90s, and that was Larry Hagman of I Dream of Jeannie, and also he was on that show Dallas. That was a big hit.
Yeah, well, people will probably say, like, because remember JR died in the show, and they had everyone was wearing T-shirts who killed JR, and then so people would probably just say to you, "Oh, you're mixing it up with that, right?" Because
well, I did run some surveys, because at that point I started the realityshifters.com website, so I was able to conduct a couple surveys in our discussion list on Yahoo, and people did remember him. They remembered Captain Kangaroo. If you watch that old TV show, these are that one's very specific to America. Yeah. So some of the ones that are more interesting are like Jane Goodall, because everyone in the world knows her. Yeah. But you're right. People then say, "Oh, you're getting her confused."
Because they can write things off as.
You think it's Diane Fossey, but that's why I remember it, because Diane Fossey was murdered, and then I remember Jane Goodall was also murdered, like within a month later, and that's when I was like, "Wait a minute, no." That's not okay. Stop that. And little did I, and then like years later, it's like she's alive. And I'm like, what? So it's not like it happened. It didn't come to my awareness right away. I'm sure she was alive all those years, but not that I noticed.
Yeah.
For me, like a large number of years passed. And then I was sort of stunned. Like Jane Goodall's doing a tour. She's doing a what? What? That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I got to
like, do I say anything?
right.
But that's really cool. Oh my God. Well, this is so much fun. And I really hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, because we didn't get into any of your stories except for just a couple. But oh my gosh.
I have a list of things to talk about. But okay, great. Well, everybody, I'm going to put links to Cynthia's info in the description box below. So check it out. You got to read Quantum Jumps and Reality Shifts if you're resonating with, you know, what is reality and what we're talking about, and read some of the stories of people's quantum jumps and reality shifts and Mandela effects, placebo effects, spontaneous remissions, all of that good stuff. And so till we meet again, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. Love you.
Love you. You're my soul sister. So bye everybody. Trying to find this.